The first time she stepped off the plane, the warmth of the Philippine air felt like a gentle hug. She had flown across continents, leaving the cold streets of Kiev behind. And yet she was not entirely prepared for the heat that seemed to seep into everything. The air, the colors, and, most unexpectedly, the people. The streets were alive with laughter, jeepneys rattling over uneven roads, and vendors calling out their offerings, a symphony she would grow to love. Her heart, however, was preoccupied. She had arrived with one goal in mind: to understand a culture so different from her own. To see what drew people here together and to meet someone who might awaken emotions she had long buried in the familiar routine of her life back home. In Ukraine, relationships were orderly. Dates were often structured, conversations measured. There was a quiet pride in how men courted women, a reserved tenderness that occasionally left her yearning for something more spontaneous. She had been in a few relationships, each defined by routine and predictability. A man might bring flowers, send a text every morning, and open doors, all gestures of love that were courteous and considerate. And yet, there was a distance, a stiffness in emotion that even the deepest feelings struggled to break through. Her first encounter with a Filipino man changed her perception almost immediately. He was not extravagant, he did not arrive with grand displays of affection. What caught her attention was the effortless charm in his approach, the way he laughed not at her jokes but with her, how he remembered small details she had never mentioned aloud. On their first date, he insisted they try street food first, guiding her through a bustling market where the scents of grilled fish, sweet mangoes, and steaming rice combined into a sensory overload. He held her hand gently, not as an obligation, but as a natural extension of the conversation they were having. She noticed how others smiled at him, greeted him warmly, and how he, in turn, moved through the crowd with ease, respectful but relaxed. What struck her most was the way he observed her reactions. When she tasted balut for the first time, her hesitation was met with laughter, light and without judgment. "It's not for everyone," he said, and she laughed too, the tension dissolving instantly. She realized that Filipino men carried an ease in life that contrasted sharply with the meticulous precision of men back home. Here, gestures of love were spontaneous, sincere, and imbued with humor. A man might tease gently about a minor mistake she made, not to embarrass, but to invite laughter and connection. In that simple interplay, she found a warmth that felt almost foreign, yet deeply familiar in the core of her heart. Back in Ukraine, she had learned to read the cues of affection carefully, to interpret silence as meaning and words as tests of loyalty. Here, the cues were different. Words were abundant, jokes were frequent, and gestures carried layers of meaning she would spend weeks unraveling. When he offered her his jacket during a sudden rainstorm, it was more than a practical action. It was an invitation into his world, a world where attention was woven seamlessly into daily life. She marveled at the balance, the way care and humor were inseparable, and how even a brief encounter felt intimate without pressure. Comparisons came naturally in her mind. She remembered a former boyfriend in Kiev, a man whose precision had been reassuring, whose structured compliments had made her feel admired. But in moments of vulnerability, the rigidity had felt cold. Here, in the Philippines, vulnerability was treated with gentle laughter, empathy, and a willingness to engage. He would ask how she felt after a long day, not as a formality, but as a genuine inquiry, and the answer was welcomed, not analyzed or measured. Her heart began to shift, noticing subtle patterns she had never experienced. Filipino men did not chase perfection in love. They embraced imperfection with patience and kindness. She began to explore more social interactions. At a local cafe, she observed couples interacting casually, men holding umbrellas over their partners, passing a single slice of cake, sharing playful banter. Unlike the formal dates she had known in Ukraine, here relationships seemed to breathe. She saw the power of pakikisama, the unspoken understanding of camaraderie and social harmony, extend naturally into romantic interactions. Humor became a bridge, and laughter a sign of connection. She realized that Filipino men, in their approach, valued comfort, emotional security, and shared joy over grandiosity or control. Her friends back home often asked if she was nervous about cultural differences. She admitted that she had been, especially with language barriers and differing traditions. Yet with every shared smile, every small gesture, the nervousness faded. On another date, he brought her to a family gathering, a simple home with the aroma of adobo and freshly cooked rice filling the air. She observed him interact with his relatives, respect evident in every word, but playfulness not lost. The balance was something she had not fully anticipated. In Ukraine, family gatherings had felt tense, often formal, and marked by careful observation. Here, love was loud, visible, and inclusive. She found herself laughing freely, joining in the music, learning a few Tagalog phrases from aunts and cousins, and realizing that connection was about joy, not restraint. Romantic gestures took on a new meaning. He would surprise her not with flowers alone, but with experiences. A trip to a hidden beach, a simple picnic under the stars, an impromptu lesson in cooking sinigang. Each act was an extension of himself, a message that love was participatory and joyful. In contrast, she remembered the careful planning of her previous relationships, which, while considerate, lacked spontaneity. There was a freedom here she had not allowed herself before, a playful experimentation with affection that felt exhilarating. She began to journal her observations, noting differences in communication, emotional expression, and daily routines. The Filipino men she encountered were nurturing yet confident, attentive yet casual, capable of deep loyalty without suffocating control. Their humor, often self-deprecating, their storytelling, vibrant, and their capacity for care, generous, contrasted sharply with the reserved, methodical approach of Ukrainian men she had known. The differences were not better or worse. They were a revelation of how culture shapes love and intimacy. As days turned into weeks, she became aware of a subtle transformation within herself. She laughed more freely, expressed appreciation without hesitation, and felt a softening in areas she had thought rigid. Her perspective on romance evolved. She began to value gestures that communicated attentiveness, humor, and emotional presence over structured rituals and formal tokens. A Filipino man might hand her a small gift, a piece of candy, a handwritten note, but the act carried authenticity, thoughtfulness, and a human warmth that had been missing in her experiences back home. There were moments of confusion, naturally. Language occasionally tripped her up, misunderstandings caused laughter, and cultural idioms left her puzzled. Yet each confusion became a bridge rather than a barrier. When he teased her with "bahala na," she had initially bristled, not understanding that it conveyed trust and flexibility rather than recklessness. Slowly, she adapted, laughing at herself, learning to embrace the flow of conversation, the rhythm of Filipino social grace. It was a lesson in humility and joy, a reminder that love was not merely about structure, but about participation and openness. She reflected on her prior relationships in Ukraine, recalling their strengths and limitations. Ukrainian men were dependable, precise, and loyal in a structured way. Yet the Filipino approach taught her a new dimension of love: adaptability, humor, and the value of shared experiences over perfection. It was not a replacement, but an expansion, a broadening of her emotional vocabulary and understanding. She noticed that she began to apply these lessons in other interactions, treating friends and strangers with more patience, humor, and genuine curiosity. Her exploration of Filipino dating culture extended to observing friendships between men and women, couples at work, and families. Loyalty and respect were deeply intertwined with lightheartedness and playfulness, creating relationships that balanced security and freedom. She realized that a Filipino man's devotion was demonstrated not only in words but in daily behaviors, checking in, remembering preferences, and fostering laughter and warmth. In Ukraine, expressions of devotion often manifested in gifts or formal communication, but the subtler nuances of participation and joy were rarer. Her mornings in the Philippines began with sunlight spilling across the narrow streets, illuminating the vibrant colors of sari-sari stores, jeepneys, and freshly painted houses. She would sip a cup of coffee, watching vendors set up their carts, hearing the laughter of children running along the alleyways, and feel a sense of calm she rarely experienced in the structured mornings back home in Kiev. But alongside this serenity was curiosity. She wanted to understand more, not just the surface of Filipino culture, but how love, relationships, and daily interactions differed fundamentally from what she had known. She had learned much in her first weeks, but now, deeper contrasts began to emerge. Filipino men had a rhythm to their affections that she found both intriguing and disarming. There was a consistency in warmth, a devotion expressed not through rigid rituals, but through presence and participation. One afternoon, she noticed how her Filipino friend held space for her emotions. When she admitted anxiety about adapting to the fast pace of the city, he did not offer a pre-planned solution, as Ukrainian men often did. Instead, he simply listened, interspersing playful jokes and anecdotes from his own life, never rushing, never correcting, never judging. It was a fluid, reassuring way of caring, one she realized she had seldom experienced in her structured relationships back home. She began comparing these experiences internally. Ukrainian men were diligent, protective, and methodical. Dates were often planned meticulously. Dinners at restaurants, walks along orderly streets, thoughtful gifts timed with precision. They valued loyalty highly and demonstrated commitment in formal, measurable ways. Yet, in moments requiring emotional improvisation, she often felt a sense of hesitation or restraint. A joke might be analyzed instead of laughed at. A gentle touch might be calculated rather than instinctive. There was no wrongness in these expressions, but the contrast with Filipino warmth was striking. Filipino men, on the other hand, blended loyalty with spontaneity. Small gestures carried significance, sending a playful text mid-afternoon, bringing her favorite snack without asking, or introducing her proudly to his family. She observed the balance of humor and seriousness in every interaction. When he apologized for a minor inconvenience, it was not a perfunctory gesture. It was accompanied by a playful smile, a story, and a reminder that mistakes were human and moments could still be shared joyfully. In this, she found an emotional transparency that contrasted with the more formalized expressions she had encountered in Ukraine. As days passed, she noticed another difference: the way Filipino men expressed pride and vulnerability. It was not through grand declarations, but in quiet, consistent acts. He would recount stories of helping friends and family, of small achievements, not to boast, but to share a part of his world. When she shared her own insecurities about adapting to the culture, he responded with empathy, patience, and subtle humor. In Ukraine, she had known men who provided practical guidance but often struggled with emotional openness. Here, vulnerability was accepted, even celebrated, and it allowed her to lower her guard in ways she hadn't anticipated. Romantic experiences deepened during her visits to local beaches and provincial towns. Filipino men treated every excursion as a shared adventure. He guided her through mangrove forests, helped her navigate small boats, and laughed when she stumbled over unfamiliar words or concepts. It was a kind of attentiveness absent from her experiences with Ukrainian men, where safety and planning often overshadowed spontaneity. The Filipino approach made her feel seen in layers she had not previously realized existed: the excitement of discovery, the comfort of care, and the joy of mutual participation. Social interactions revealed more contrasts. At a gathering with Filipino friends, she watched the easy camaraderie and mutual teasing that pervaded conversations. Men joked openly without offending, listened without interrupting, and responded to every story with attentiveness. The respect for personal space was matched by an unspoken rule of inclusivity. Everyone mattered, everyone contributed. In Kyiv, friendships and dating interactions were more formal. Humor was restrained, teasing measured, and conversations often structured. Both cultures valued respect, but in the Philippines, respect intertwined seamlessly with joy, creating an atmosphere that encouraged emotional freedom. She reflected on the Filipino concept of pakikisama, the social glue of camaraderie, and how it influenced romantic relationships. A Filipino man would consider not only her feelings, but also the environment around them. Group dynamics mattered. Harmony and empathy were built into every action. It was a stark contrast to the Ukrainian emphasis on individualism in courtship, where loyalty and commitment were tested through one-on-one interactions rather than through relational dynamics in community. She noticed that this made relationships more layered and nuanced, requiring adaptability and emotional intelligence that she was beginning to value deeply. Food became another arena of comparison. Filipino meals were communal and imbued with symbolism. When he invited her to share halo halo or freshly grilled street food, it wasn't merely about sustenance. It was a gesture of inclusion, intimacy, and tradition. Eating with hands, sharing dishes, and joking about mistakes created bonding moments that extended beyond the meal itself. In Ukraine, meals were often quieter affairs, and while attentiveness existed, the shared humor and ritualized joy around food were less prominent. She found herself savoring not only the flavors, but the emotional resonance of these communal experiences. Even subtle gestures communicated profound meaning. When he remembered her preferences, a favorite mango flavor, the way she liked her coffee, or the correct pronunciation of her name, it felt both ordinary and extraordinary. It was the constancy of attention, the subtle weaving of care into everyday life, that distinguished these interactions from those she had experienced in Europe. In Ukraine, attentiveness often manifested in specific events or gifts, but the seamless integration of care into routine life was rarer. She began to realize that Filipino expressions of affection were both pervasive and gentle, demanding neither recognition nor reward. Her reflection extended to humor and storytelling. Filipino men laughed easily and often, using humor to navigate emotional complexity. Teasing was playful, never cruel, and even when disagreements arose, humor softened the tension. In contrast, Ukrainian men were capable of humor, but in romantic contexts it was sometimes restrained, calculated, or directed at intellectual wit, rather than relational connection. She found herself delighting in the way humor in the Philippines became a language of love itself, light, immediate, and profoundly human. Cultural and religious values also shaped contrast. Filipino men often integrated spiritual practice and moral consideration naturally into daily life. Respect for elders, humility, and a sense of service influenced romantic dynamics. In Kiev, spirituality existed, but was less consistently tied to day-to-day interaction. This difference created a layer of emotional depth for her. She saw that Filipino men's actions were informed by a broader cultural understanding of responsibility, loyalty, and relational integrity. She felt emotionally anchored by this, sensing a stability that complemented their playfulness. Language continued to fascinate her. Tagalog and English intermingled seamlessly, with expressions carrying multiple layers of meaning. Utang na loob was not just a phrase, but a philosophy of gratitude and reciprocity, one that shaped relationships and created bonds of mutual care. In contrast, Ukrainian expressions were often more literal, with subtle cultural idioms that required contextual understanding. She learned to laugh at her mistakes, to embrace ambiguity, and to see communication as an act of empathy, not simply exchange of information. This shift challenged her previous assumptions about love and connection. She noticed how Filipino men handled arguments and disagreements differently. Tension was rarely escalated. Instead, humor, compromise, and empathy guided the conversation. There was a focus on resolution rather than conquest, on understanding rather than victory. In Ukraine, disagreements often demanded structured negotiation or silence until resolution. While effective, it sometimes left emotional residues. The Filipino approach left room for emotion, laughter, and relational repair without pride or ego dominating the process. Family relationships were another area of insight. Observing him with his parents, siblings, and extended relatives, she saw a consistent thread of care, patience, and inclusion. Family was central, yet it did not suffocate personal autonomy. In Ukraine, family bonds were strong, but romantic relationships sometimes operated separately from the familial web. Here, integration created richness, depth, and emotional learning that influenced her perception of partnership. She realized that love was inseparable from community, that shared experiences extended beyond the couple to touch a wider network of support and joy. Romance was not measured in grand gestures, but in consistency, attention, and shared experiences. He would accompany her to festivals, guide her through traditions, and teach her songs or dances. She learned not just the culture, but the emotional rhythm of everyday life. These moments contrasted with Ukrainian dating patterns, where emphasis was placed on planned events, status, and predictability. The Filipino model embraced fluidity, adaptability, and relational responsiveness, qualities she found transformative. Even in leisure, contrasts were evident. At the beach, he joked about her sunburn, offered playful splashes, and joined her in spontaneous games with locals. In Ukraine, leisure often revolved around controlled activities, planned outings, and measured fun. Here, joy was participatory, inclusive, and improvisational. She found herself laughing harder, living freer, and realizing that love was as much about shared experience as commitment. She began to understand why many foreigners expressed fascination with Filipino men. The balance of humor, loyalty, attention, empathy, and lightheartedness created an emotional landscape unlike anything she had encountered. It was not perfect, not without challenges, but it was dynamic, authentic, and profoundly human. In comparison, Ukrainian men offered stability, thoughtfulness, and quiet care, qualities she continued to value. Yet the Filipino approach opened new dimensions of relational creativity and emotional expression. Her reflection extended beyond romance into her own self-awareness. She noticed increased patience, empathy, and willingness to embrace uncertainty. Humor became a tool for coping, and love became a practice of presence, attention, and joy, rather than performance. These lessons rippled into friendships, professional interactions, and personal growth. She realized that observing and engaging with Filipino men was less about comparison and more about discovery of culture, emotion, and her own capacity to receive and reciprocate love.